In this video, we will explore some ways we can show changes in rank over time. We will use the Superstore dataset that comes with your installation of Tableau, so you should be able to recreate these charts. For the demos, we will rank subcategories by profit from year to year. To show rank changes, we will use a few charts. There's bar charts, bump chart, slope chart, and connected scatter plot. I've added chapters in the description below if you want to jump to a specific section. Note that depending on your dataset and how many records you're ranking, some of these charts may be a good fit, and sometimes they're just not the right chart. So please use these charts with caution and intention. We will also use a few Tableau features in this walkthrough, specifically quick table calculation for ranking, data highlighter, adjusting the options for labeling, using dual axis charts for sum, and additional table calculation functions for finding first and last points. Let's get started. Let's start with a simple bar chart. We're first going to build a bar chart that shows subcategory profit through the years. Let's drag subcategory over to rows. Let's take profit onto columns, and we're going to break this down by year. So let's take order date, drag that over to columns as well. For now, let's go ahead and change the default properties for profit. So right click on profit, default properties, number format. Let's just change this to currency, 0 decimal places. Let's also add some totals. So in your sidebar in the analytics tab, let's drag over totals. And we're only going to add the row grand totals. Let's move the grand total to the left. So right click on the grand total header, row totals to left. And now let's sort the grand total from the highest profit to the lowest profit. We can do that by hovering over the axes and sorting the profit. So how do we add ranking? First thing we're going to do is we're going to copy profit over to label. And once we copy over, we're going to add a quick table calculation for ranking. So a shortcut for copying this over, if you're on a PC, it's going to be Control and then dragging the pill over to label. If you're using a Mac, it's going to be a command drag. So let's change this label now on the drop-down. Quick table calculation, it's going to be rank. So this is the first variation. However, we can see that it's very messy. It's very cluttered. So what we can do is we can adjust what gets labeled. We don't have to show all the ranking all the time. We can click on label and change the options. So for example, let's click on label. Instead of labeling all points up front, we can select what gets labeled. Perhaps it's going to be the minimum maximum, or maybe just the most recent, or the selected or the highlighted. For this demo, we're going to use highlighted. So under label, select highlighted. So to complement this, we're going to add a data highlighter to our subcategory. So on the drop-down of the subcategory pill in your rows, show highlighter. So now we don't see the ranking up front. However, when we go to the data highlighter, we can decide which subcategories we want to see, and we can decide to show the ranks at that point. Let's make a small variation to this. Let's duplicate this chart. So right click on the chart, duplicate. Let's clear the highlighter. So instead of showing the subcategories, let's now show the rank instead in our column. So we're going to swap these. I'm going to move the pill with a rank onto rows, and I'm going to move subcategory over to detail. So let's drag this over to rows and move subcategory to detail. Now what just happened? Because it doesn't look like what we've created. The rank is a table calculation. If we go back to our original chart, if we hover over this, the rank has a specific direction. It is ranking along table down, which means it ranks based on what it sees that is laid out on the rows. However, in our second chart, there is no longer a column of values. So we just need to adjust this. First adjustment is we're going to change the rank. So instead of an axis or a continuous pill, we're going to make this discrete. So instead of an axis right here or a y-axis, we're going to display the rank one by one. It's going to be discrete. So on the drop-down, we set this to discrete. And it's just going to give us a warning that there are no grand totals if we have discrete measures, and that's fine. And this is what we're going to see. Again, this still doesn't look like our initial bar chart. But remember the original direction. It is table down. There is no table down at this point. So we need to adjust the direction. On the pill that has rank, let's click on the drop down. we're going to find this option called Compute Using. Right now, the ranking that we want is the subcategory for a specific year. Therefore, the choice that we need to make is we want to compute using subcategory. The direction will be the subcategory. That's what we're ranking in a specific year. So let's select that on the drop-down, Compute Using subcategory. So now this mimics our first bar chart. And in this case, we simply just need to adjust our labels. I'm going to copy over the rank onto the label, and I'm also going to change the subcategory so it shows up on label as well. So in here, Control Drag onto label, and we're simply going to change the subcategory. Instead of detail, we're going to click on that icon and we're going to change this to label. And remember that our label only shows up when highlighted. So let's take a look at our options again. So under label, it's still selected to highlighted. We're just going to adjust our text right now. We can simply click on the ellipses. So on the ellipses, so let's adjust this and put this in the same line. Let's also add a number or a hashtag and click OK. So what does this look like now? Well, when we take a look at our subcategory data highlighter and we select some of these values, then we can see their changes over time. So for example, for copiers, it started out as number 7, then rose to number 3, and for the last 2 years, it's been number 1. Again, we can make different kinds of variations when we display a simple bar chart like this showing rank. The second type of chart we're going to look at is a bump chart. So a bump chart is basically a line chart, but the intention is to show the rank changes over time. So we are not plotting actual values or actual profit amounts. What we're going to plot in our line chart is the rank. Usually for bump charts, we usually create a dual axis chart so we can easily see the rank changes. So let's try that out. So let's build a line chart first. We're going to take our order date, put that on columns. We're going to take our profit, put that on rows. Let's set this to entire view. And let's take our subcategory and put that on detail. So what we have right now is just a regular line chart. But what we want to do is we want to take all the subcategories in a year and we want to rank them against each other. So we can add our quick table calculation for rank now. So on our measure on the drop down, quick table calculation, it's going to be rank. Up front though, it doesn't look right. If we hover over any of these points, it's actually going to tell us that it's ranking profit along table across. But again, what does that mean? One way to try to understand what's happening is to duplicate this into a crosstab. So let's right click on this bump chart. I'm going to right click and duplicate as a crosstab. When we go to that new sheet that gets created, it shows us this crosstab or this text table. And in here, it's a little bit easier to see. The table across means it's going to take a subcategory and it's going to rank across the years. So it's going to take the profit on a year-to-year basis, for example, for accessories, and it's going to rank if 2022 is the highest one and 2019 is the lowest one. This is not what we want for our bump chart. What we needed to do is to look only at a specific year and rank along the subcategories. So we can simply change that. And to change that, we can go to the pill on the drop-down, Compute Using, and the direction we want to choose is subcategory. At this point, subcategory is going to be the same as table down, but we're just going to be a little bit more specific in our choice right now. So on the drop down, Compute Using subcategory. Now we can see that this changes. It doesn't rank along the years anymore. It ranks the subcategories against each other. This is the setting we want to do for our bump chart. So going back to our original chart, in here, sum of profit, Compute Using subcategory. Typically in a bump chart as well, because we are ranking, we also want to reverse the axes because rank number 1 is the highest rank. But by default in a line chart, the one that has the highest number will be at the very top of the axes. So we're just going to reverse this. So we can right click on the axes, edit the axes, and from here we can reverse. So let's reverse this and close. So this is essentially your bump chart. But we're going to make some adjustments to make it a little bit more presentable. We're going to make this into a dual axis chart. We're going to duplicate our sum of profit that has rank. And once we duplicate this over, we're going to use circles so we can put the rank inside the circles. So let's copy the sum of profit over, Control drag or a Command click drag if you're on a Mac. And for the second pill, we are going to use the second marks card. We're going to change this one to a circle. For the other marks card, let's go back. Instead of automatic, we're simply going to set this to a line because we don't want this automatically changing. And now going back to the circle, what we want to do is to adjust the circle so that it has the actual rank inside the circle. So we can copy over the rank, put that inside the circle. We're going to put this in the label. So Control drag our profit. And in here, we're going to set this to be inside the circle. So in here, let's align this to be center. Right now, we don't see anything because we have very big circles. So let's just adjust the size. And for now, let's make this into a dual axis chart first so that we can reclaim a little bit of the space. So for the second pill in your rows, on the drop down, you should be able to find a dual axis option. Let's adjust the circle size again. So make sure you are targeting the marks card that has the circle icon. So under size, adjust this a little bit more so that we have slightly bigger circles. Now a few more things to adjust. The second axis actually starts from 0 all the way to 18. So we do need this to be reversed, and we're also going to synchronize the two axes that we have right now. So let's reverse this first. So right click, edit axis. We're going to reverse this. We're going to right click again on the second axis and we're going to synchronize. Now we may not want to show the axes as well. So we're just going to hide the headers. So right click on the axis, uncheck show header. So it's going to look like this. Let's make one more adjustment to the circle size. It's still a little bit big. Be something like that. And maybe adjust the label font. One more change that we might want to add is to have the label for the subcategory on the line ends. So let's do that. So let's go to the line marks card. And from here, we're going to change the subcategory. Instead of detail, we're going to set this to label. You can do this by clicking on the icon or simply dragging subcategory to label. Let's adjust the settings for label. So click on label. And this time, perhaps we want line ends. So it's going to show up on both places. So at this point, it's just a matter of reformatting and refining this more, perhaps changing the font styles, the font sizes, removing some grid lines, just to clean this up a little bit more. Our next chart is a slope chart. A slope chart is a line where the intention is to show a before and after. It shows 2 points, and the intention again is to compare and show the difference between 2 points. For this example, we will start by duplicating our bump chart. Right click, duplicate, and let's change the name. Let's call this our slope chart. Now we are already ranking over time. The only change we need to do is to select our 2 points. While we can manually select maybe 2 years, another way we can do it is by simply allowing Tableau to figure out what the first point and the last point is if we wanted to compare our first year and our last year. And to do that, we can use table calculations. There are table calculation functions that allow us to pick the first point in a window and the last point in a window. Let's give that a try. So we're going to create a calculated field. So on the drop down, create calculated field. And in here, we're simply going to call this first or last. First or last. So in here, we're going to use the first function first. So first function, and we're going to check if the value is 0. So this function, let's take a look at the documentation. Let's expand this. If we click on first, this is the description for the first function. The way it works is when you have points, the first point will always receive a value of 0, and any point away from the first point will receive a negative value. So it subtracts 1 as it moves away from the first point. So the next point will be -1, then -2, -3. Here we also want to identify the last point. So we're just going to add or last is equal to 0. Now the last function, if we click on that, we're going to see the documentation on the right-hand side. So if you have a line, the last point will always receive a value of 0. And as points move away from the last point, it actually adds 1. The second to the last point will have a last value of 1, and then 2, and then 3. So this expression here will help us pick out automatically the first and the last point in a specific window. Let's click OK. And we simply need to add this to our filter. So drag that over to our filters, and we're going to select where that is true. Before we click OK, notice that we have 4 years. You have 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. Once we click OK, what should remain will be just 2019 and 2022. Next year, when we have a brand new year, we don't have to go back in here and manually fiddle because it's going to know that the last point will be 2023. Let's click OK. And this is our slope chart. The final chart is a connected scatter plot. A scatter plot is used when we want to visualize and analyze two continuous variables, usually between an independent and a dependent variable. The connected scatter plot is a variation of this. In a connected scatter plot, we're going to connect the dots based on a specific sequence. In our example, we're going to introduce our time component and connect the dots based on the time component. So let's start off with a simple scatter plot first. In here, I'm going to use sales as well. So let's format sales first. So right click on sales, default properties, number format, make this into a currency and 0 decimal places. Let's put our sales on columns. It's going to be your x-axis. We're going to put our profit on rows. It's going to be your y-axis. At this point, let's clean this up a little bit. Let's go to format, lines, and remove the grid lines. Let's also add our subcategory to detail. Let's also set the fit to entire view. At this point, let's make this into a line. When we change the mark from automatic to line, this is what happens. The way it connects the points is going to be based on their position in the scatter plot. But this is not what we want. What we want to do is to connect the points specific to a subcategory, and it also needs to be ordered based on the year. So right now, we're going to take our order date, we're going to put that to the path. The path property allows us to specify the sequence of how to connect the dots. So the way this works is for each category now, the line is connected based on when they happened. For example, take a look at this line, copiers, that's 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. If we take a look at this, again, it's not connecting it based on the values. It doesn't go from here first, and then there, and then there, and then there, because that would have been a totally different sequence or a totally different line. In this case, it follows the year. So the first point, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. So now we're going to introduce our dual axis chart to make this our connected scatter plot. Let's duplicate sum of profit on rows. So for the second marks card, which is this one, we're going to change this into a circle, very similar to what we did with the bump chart and the slope chart. So click on this. Let's make this into a circle. And this time around, we're going to add the rank inside the circle. Again, very similar to what we did with our bump chart and our slope chart. So let's add profit onto the label, and we're going to add our rank. So on the drop down, quick table calculation, we're going to add rank. Right now, we're seeing all ones. It's because we haven't set the direction yet. So going back to the pill that has the rank on the drop down, compute using, and it's going to be a long subcategory. Let's make sure that these labels are in the center of the circle. So under label, again, make sure that you are targeting the circle at this point, not the line, so not that one. So label for the circle, we're going to set the alignment to center, center horizontally and center vertically. Maybe adjust the size of the circles a little bit. And once we have this, let's create a dual axis chart. We can do that by clicking on the second pill and selecting dual axis. Drop down, dual axis. Again, let's synchronize our axes and let's make a few more refinements. And now let's add our highlighter. So let's take a highlighter for subcategory. So on the drop down, show highlighter. So if we're looking at a very specific subcategory, for example, phones, on the highlighter, let's select phones. And we can see in here that the phones started as number 1 and then number 1. And again, this is the intersection of the sum and profit. So we can see the sum and profit as well as we expand our chart. On the third year, it's number 4 and then moved on to number 3. But again, we can see our sales and profit for phone as well as how it was ranking over those 4 years. And that's it for this video. We've covered 4 main charts. We have the bar chart, bump chart, slope chart, and connected scatter plot. But in addition to that, we also covered a few more topics. We've reviewed table calculations. We've looked at table calculation directions. We reviewed a little bit on formatting and using dual axis charts. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you for your time, and I will see you again next time.